What's up guys, Multiplier here. What I thought I'd do today is a different style of video, and this one is going to be all about a sample pack I made. Bit of a behind the scenes sort of vibe, explaining how the sample pack came about and kind of how it came to be. And what I'll also do is kind of run through a few of the presets, kind of showing you how they're kind of made and kind of why I did what I did in terms of kind of designing the sound. So you get a few kind of sound design tips as well as just some background info in terms of how these things come about. Partly because I get a lot of people asking me how do sample packs happen and kind of how do I get into it. So this thing might be useful. Sweetness. So what sample pack are we talking about? It is this guy, as you probably guessed, Massive Percussive Synths on Essential Sounds. Hands in the air, woo, massive in the background. Pretty radical cover. But yeah, it's basically a whole bunch of massive presets, 50 to be exact. And yeah, they're kind of marketed at kind of the big room house sort of vibe, that kind of percussive drop synth sort of thing. Think Martin Garrix's Animals, that sort of vibe. I know it's super popular, but a lot of people need these sounds. And to be honest, although we marketed it as kind of like a big room predominantly sort of thing, they're super useful for trap or pretty much any genre, just because a percussive sound is a percussive sound, and you don't even have to just use it as a percussive sound. You can like layer it up something with a lesser attack, just to kind of use this sound as your kind of attack, and then something else as your kind of sustain and release. So they're pretty just really versatile presets, and all 8 macro knobs are mapped, and so each sound is super diverse, especially depending on where on the keyboard you press the button. So it's just sort of a really useful pack of 50 things that you can kind of either use by themselves or layered up a few times just to kind of be your main kind of riff, or you can use them as part of something else. Just because there's a lot of kind of interesting non-standard sound designy sort of stuff in there, which is pretty sweet. And of course it's a massive, which everyone has, which is pretty radical. So yeah, it's doing pretty well right now. I think it's at number 10 on the overall Beatport chart right now. Yeah, number 10 overall. It was up to number 8 a few days ago. In the preset section, I think it's 3, if I remember correctly. Yeah, number 3 in the preset section, and like 6 or something in Electro House. It's doing pretty well, pretty stoked on it. And yeah, I'll probably tell you now how it all came about. So, once upon a time, there was Multiplier, and he was like, I need to make another sample pack because it's about time I do. So, emailed a sample pack label run by a pretty big dubstep producer who's pretty well known. I won't call him out, but yeah, basically I emailed him, talked about what sort of pack to do, settled on some sort of aggressive sort of percussive synth sort of vibe. Talked about what we're going to do. I did a load of presets, sent them back to him. He said, cool, presets nearly there, just make them a bit more better, and then make the demo track a lot more banging. Sent them back. He was like, sweet, demo track needs to be better though. Sent him another demo track back, and eventually he stopped answering to email. So I was like, fuck that, let's ask someone else. So I asked my friend Brandon from Facebook, who runs Essential Sounds as well as a whole bunch of other labels, sample pack labels, kind of if he wanted to put it out, and he was like, sweet, I like it as it is, let's just do it. And yeah, that was pretty much it. And as far as the kind of the sound design goes, what I wanted to do was kind of still have percussive synths, but what I didn't want to do is look up, say, how all the big room guys are making their synths or their percussive sounds or whatever, and just kind of redo it myself. I wanted to just basically do it how I would do it. That way I'd get the kind of the vibe, but it would definitely be a new sort of thing. And I definitely think a lot of the sounds in it are quite different and quite interesting. I would play an example of like the whole demo track, but what's the point when I'm going to include a link below? So look below for an example of the sort of sounds I have in mind, or the sounds that I use. So yeah, there'll be a link to this ting in the description, and then synths only demo just kind of strips out all the other bits so you can just hear the detail of the sounds, whereas the full demo gives you a bit of an idea of how the synths would fit in with an actual big roomy sort of track. It's pretty sweet, and obviously because I don't make big room, it's not super cliche, even though marketing wise, well, you got to do what you got to do, right? Coolness in the brain, right? So that's pretty much the pack. And yeah, I'll open up a few presets and kind of see how it goes. Not sure if I've mentioned already yet, but all the presets have 8 macro knobs mapped as well, which just makes them super useful. Just because you can automate them kind of going throughout your track, which pretty rad. Makes it a lot more useful than if you'd got, say, so what a lot of the big room guys were doing, like this was how Animals was made in terms of the drop synth. It wasn't a synth at all, it was a sample. So you'd get like a percussive sample and then just kind of pitch it up and down and process it a little bit, and there's your melody. If you make it with a synth, then you can automate the macro knobs in it to kind of have the sound evolve over time, which is radical. Right, so Massive, I should do some clicking, right. Now I've got to try and find where I've put all these presets. Right, probably music production, probably good shout. Probably new Massive presets. Check out my naming conventions. Old Massive presets, new EP, new EP, new Massive presets. Naming conventions are essential. It's probably along the lines of percussive synths for using, maybe. Let's try this. Let's pick up one at random. 14, why not? Coolness. So this is quite a simple one in terms of the design and in terms of the modulation and all that kind of coolness. So as you can see, I'll assume you don't know too much about Massive, but basically, yeah, what's going on is the fourth envelope here, the one I just clicked a second ago, right here, is the kind of the envelope for the amplitude of the wave. So that's just like the general shape of the wave. So as you can see, it's quite like a percussive, plucky sort of shape, which is what we want. And then what I've done is, although the fourth envelope is kind of like this and it has been mapped to the amplitude, for some reason I also mapped it to the amplitude of each oscillator, which just made it more kind of plucky, which is pretty rad. And what I also did, which is quite useful, is map a macro knob to stuff like the attack and the decay. So you see I got the attack mapped with this macro knob, attack, and then number 3, which I called tail, should have called it decay, and then it's mapped here as well, which is pretty cool. I did that with pretty much every preset, just so, because you can kind of dial in with every single sound exactly how kind of thick it is and what sort of attack it is. Because sometimes you want it really kind of like short attack, kind of really stabby. Sometimes you want it a bit more kind of interesting with the attack, which is what you want to do when you want to make the attack a bit longer, which is pretty cool. And then we got 3 oscillators. Important thing going on is one of the oscillators is a different octave, so it's 12 semitones down. That just spreads it out in terms of frequency, so that sounds thicker and more full. And then we also got some filter action going on. In this case, we've got scream, which is pretty kind of aggro, and then acid. And then you can also see, if you look at the fourth envelope, it is being mapped to the cutoff of each filter. So, and then by kind of tweaking all these settings, it kind of comes up with quite an aggressive sort of sound. And the reason why I mapped the envelope to the cutoff is it's a pretty standard synthesis technique, especially for the attack of a sound, is just to have the cutoff of a filter kind of modulating. It just kind of gives it movement in the attack and just makes it sound kind of, fundamentally, if you want to make a sound interesting, you've got to have stuff happening. And this is a really nice way, really tried and tested way to do that, is to kind of fucks with the cutoff of a filter, which is pretty rad. But otherwise, yeah, it's pretty simple preset, to be really honest. There's a few cool details, stuff like in the voicing tab, we got 2 voices. Again, this is standard for pretty much all my presets in this pack. Unisono spread on and pan position turned on, and then by detuning it a bit here with this guy, it kind of spreads the sound out. I won't go into too much detail, but that's just standard synthesis in terms of making sounds wide. Check out my video on making shit wide in Massive/FM8 if you want more details as to how that works. It's pretty coolness. And I've got the modulation OSC working with the phase. It's kind of a nice way to give it a lot more kind of harmonic action in the mid and the upper frequencies. Just kind of fuck about with that a bit. There's no noise in this particular case. Got some clipping. Just gives it a bit of, it's just kind of distortion. These inserts here with this clip, just a little bit of distortion, adds a bit of kind of top end fuzzy sort of thing. Just a bit more character. Fundamentally, you want a lot going on, even if it's quite subtle. Which is pretty cool. Actually, I should probably play the sound. That's going to be a good idea, right? I haven't got my headphones on, so no idea if I'm in the right octave or how it's going to sound, but no idea what that sounded like without my headphones on, but that's what it sounds like. Right, what else about the sound? Got a bit of tube distortion with the amount of distortion mapped with the macro knob you see down here. Drive is like another word for distortion, kind of how hard you're running the distortion. It's pretty coolness. That one shouldn't be there, it's not doing anything. Dimension expander is the best way to describe it. Expands the dimensions a bit. It just makes it sound a bit kind of thicker. What it's really doing is it's kind of like short tail reverb and a bit of delay action. It just makes the sound a bit kind of, gives it dimension as it kind of the name kind of suggests. Just makes it sound a bit thicker, a bit more interesting, and a bit more real. Even though obviously it's synthesized, you want it to feel like it's in a real space for it to sound kind of real and ting, which is coolness. Now let's open up another preset, something that's hopefully a bit more interesting. Not that one. Let's try and find one that's mental. That one's not too mental either, to be honest. Right, let's find a mental one. That one's not too mental. That one's not too mental. There must be some mental ones. That one's not too bad. Looks like they're all a similar sort of vibe. In terms of the sound design. There you go, that one's a bit more interesting. Right, so yeah, as you see, what I've got going on with this one is naturally, of course, all the oscillators are different voices each time and the filters are a bit different. We've got similar sort of stuff going on in terms of the kind of the fourth envelope here. But what we got is some coolness going on with the format setting of this kind of bit here. So instead of using the standard kind of wavetable thing, it's doing some stuff with the formats, which just gives it a different sort of character. And then we've been modulating a bit of that with the fourth envelope there. And then we've got, again, all the macros kind of mapped. You can also see if I open up another preset, it's quite typical for me to map the wavetable position of each sound to a different point, or the wavetable to a different macros, just so you can kind of, by tweaking the timbre settings here, you can kind of change the character of the sound, which is pretty cool. And you can see here, yeah, I'm doing some more stuff with the fourth envelope, some more stuff with the kind of pulse width. So the general idea in terms of making these sounds is just to kind of keep modulating stuff. Now, obviously, because these are short synths, there's only so much modulation you can really do in a short amount of time. So to give you a kind of something to compare it to, if you were to take, let me give you an example of a synth, like an evolving sound effect that I made recently for a sound effects pack. What the hell is that folder? No idea what that is. What the hell is that for? No idea what that's for. Right. Music production, getting off topic, but you know what? Fuck it. Sample pack projects, SFX. Oh, I can't remember where these are now. There you go. Let's try this one. That one's boring. Let's try this one. Bit more interesting. Now I'll pick something else. This one looks a bit mad. So this would be an example of a sort of preset that you would do for like a sound effect. Let's play the said sound effect to see what it sounds like. Again, no idea what it sounds like. I haven't got my headphones on. Not entirely sure why I'm showing you presets, not part of the thing I'm supposed to be promoting in this video, but whatever. This shows you the sort of thing you do when you're doing kind of more complicated sounds. As you can see, there's a lot more going on. You've got the blue stuff, which is the kind of the envelope, which tends to be for the attack of a sound. You've also got these kind of green dudes, which are LFOs or LFOs for short. Just kind of modulating things, kind of, again, because you've got more time to play with, you can kind of do more with it in terms of modulation. Kind of put modulations upon envelopes, and then you've got macros in there as well. Got some V's floating about, which is velocity sensitive kind of stuff. So depending on how hard you whack the keyboard, changes how much the slider moves in this particular case, just so that affects the character of the sound. So there's more you can do with kind of more time. But yeah, in the case of these percussive synths, they're not too complicated, to be really honest, but they are really refined and really cool sounding, which is pretty rad. And it's all in the details after all. Anyone can do a shit sound. Right. Let's find another one. Find the first one. Why not? There you go. Doing. Pretty cool. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Sounds and ting. Rightness. So, been multiplier. If you want to buy the pack, buy it lots of times. But yeah, I thought I'd give you a bit of insight into how the sample pack was kind of came about. Gnarly. Sweetness, been Multiplier, been a video.